Keith is a great writer. He's done some stuff on the history, literary history of our environs here in San Francisco and so forth. And I've only heard him actually read once, but he's a good reader too. So with all that, okay, let's give him a warm welcome.
Hi, thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. As I'm sure you're all aware, this is Dia de los Muertos, and um, hey, that's very popular. I like that holiday a lot because it's not really a time of mourning so much as a time of recognition and memorial for those we've lost and a celebration of their lives. And there's a literary form associated with Dia de los Muertos called the Calavera Literaria, or the literary skull. And they're short, lighthearted poems on the theme of death, if one can imagine a lighthearted poem on death, that are associated with, as I said, the Day of the Dead. So I'm going to start with one of my literary skulls. It's called Breathing Cycle, Grieving Cycle, or Time After Time. Breathe in, grieve out. Time is my cruelest enemy, and yet I would see still more time as a friend to me. Time giveth, and time taketh away. For the next poem, we're going to move on to Paris. This one is titled, I'll Always Have Paris, and it begins with an epigraph from Albert Camus. I rebel, therefore we exist. I'm sporting a dashing marionette and beret while sipping a pastis in a left-bank cafe and savoring Paris and Saint-Germain-des-Prés. I expound on my impression of Impressionism and express my obsession with Expressionism with an occasional digression on the Vienna secessionism. I dismiss any criticism of a Sartre-Camus schism as I insist on the meaninglessness of the existence of a rift in existentialism. But perhaps because I'm sitting at a table all alone and debating fervently, but with no one, the other cafe patrons here for Moet and Pâté seem on edge as they edgily edge their tables away. Still, I repel, therefore I exist, and another item's been checked off my list. We'll stay in Paris for a moment. I wrote the title of the next one in French, La force de l'imagination, but when I pronounced it in French to a native speaker, she acted like I'd stabbed her or something. So I'll go with the English title, which in my mind is The Power of the Imagination. And this one begins with an epigraph from Ernest Hemingway. If you're lucky enough to have lived in Paris as a young man, then wherever you go for the rest of your life, it stays with you, for Paris is a movable feast. I was in Paris as a young man. The architecture was beautiful. History prowled the streets, and the women were French. Even my youthful poverty seemed romantic. 40 years later, I returned to Paris. My love affair with poverty had ended badly, but the buildings are still beautiful, and history, some of it mine, still stalks the rueful streets. And I imagined that Parisian women would remember me. That notion has clarified for me the meaning of the word imagined. From Paris, we're going to San Francisco. This one is titled In the Café Trieste, and it's dedicated to Fanny Renoir. In a mural, rural women share stories of their joys and their regrets, while village fishermen tend their dories and mend their nets. Photographic fragments of time from a past past its prime indecorously decorate walls of fame and forgotten names. The avant and the derrière garde, the savant, the scared, and the scarred sit at rainbow-hued tavolini, discussing Coppola, Fellini, and Pasolini, invoking Camus, Sartre, or Simone de Beauvoir, or Pierre Auguste, Jean-Claude, or Fanny Renoir. In this literary sanctuary, a countercultural coterie extol righteousness and roguery as they share their prose and poetry, some prosaic, some profane, some profound, on hallowed sacred ground. The blessed and the dispossessed coalesce in the Café Trieste. For the next one, we're going to Beijing, China. I'm told that there are 13 million bicycles in Beijing. And when my daughter Miranda was 10 years old, she and I went to Beijing and rented 2 bicycles. Miranda's here tonight, by the way. She's no longer 10 years old, though. And everywhere we went, we were surrounded by other bicyclists and the sounds of bicycle bells ringing. And at one point in time, Miranda remarked to me, in jest, I believe, "Is it called Beijing because it sounds like bicycle bells ringing?" So this one is titled Onomatopoeia. Beijing, Beijing, bicycle bells ring. Beijing, Beijing, from Badaling to the tombs of the Ming. Beijing, Beijing, from the park at Taoranting in Yixing. Beijing, Beijing, from Wanfujing in Danqing. Beijing, Beijing, the tintinnabulation of the capital of a nation. Beijing, Beijing. I should have mentioned this one's dedicated. That one was dedicated to Miranda. The next one's titled Growing Pains. Sometimes when we're lonely, we find we're not alone. So we get back together and find that we have grown, but we've grown apart. As an introduction to the next poem, I'm very briefly, I promise, going to discuss some poetic forms. You're all familiar, I assume, with a Shakespearean sonnet that's 14 lines of iambic pentameter with a specific rhyming scheme, 3 quatrains followed by a rhyming couplet. You're probably familiar as well with the Japanese haiku form that in English is usually, not always, but usually 5 syllables followed by 7 syllables followed by 5 syllables. Less well known to American audiences is a Japanese form called the senryu, which is identical in syllable count to a haiku, 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables. The difference is haiku are typically about nature or the seasons or something contemplative. One of mine is, "The reflection of the summer sun is splintered by the breaking waves," whereas senryu are very worldly, ironic, or humorous in nature. So, with that introduction, I am going to do my adaptation of Shakespeare's sonnet number 18 that I've re-envisioned for contemporary American audiences as a 17-syllable senryu. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Yes, thou art totally hot. I'm going to do another senryu. This one is perhaps more meaningful to people who have spent some time in Greenwich Village. I call it Bleecker Street Winter. Regardless of how bleak it is where you are, there is a bleaker street. And one more. My car was burgled, but my poems weren't stolen. I thought they were good. The next poem I read back in May and for First Friday's North Beach, which was International Workers' Month, and it's called Blue Blood versus Blue Collar. When I hear people speaking disparagingly about the working class, I wonder what distresses them most, the notion of working or class. Fanny Renoir told me that during the COVID pandemic, the first year when we were in isolation, she wrote an entire book. During that same period of time, I wrote the following poem. I don't typically write topical poems because they don't age very well, but this one hopefully still has some shelf life. It's called Dot Companionship. We're living in a dot-coma world where people indulge in the latest trends through dot communication with family and friends, abjuring the latest couture glam and glitter, yet fashionably posting dot comments on Twitter. From the dot comfort of their homes phones in houses via Google Chrome or Safari browsers without the need for a comb or trousers. But while we're living in a virtual reality, we're sacrificing a genuine normality. And while something is gained, something is lost. Dot companionship is restrained, and there is a cost. The web can be a place to share, but it can also be a web-like snare. Living in an app is inappropriate when it becomes a trap or opiate. One can zoom to cartoon without leaving their room, but please don't assume that that room's not a tomb. The crypt of encryption may provide a private place, but none, I think, do there embrace. There are advantages to being unplugged, actually is preferable to being virtually hugged. This one is titled Beat Attitude or Let It Beat. Beat, upbeat, heartbeat, browbeat, backbeat, bluebeat, drumbeat, offbeat, downbeat, deadbeat, beat back, beat off, beat up, beat down, and yet unbeaten. Although the events described in this next poem happened actually close to 50 years ago, it's still a work in progress, and this is the first time I've ever read it. It's called Sublunary Lovers, or Full Moon in the Salt Desert. The full moon rose. Its shimmering glow on the salt desert reflected the crystal surface, already white as a ghost's bleached bones, back onto the lunar luminescence of the sky, turning the heavens and the earth white as a bride's first wedding gown, and veiling the night in an intoxicating light. An angel-like woman interrupted my dream to inform me that every direction is wrong. I'm going to conclude with a literary history of San Francisco. This one is dedicated to the late Jack Hirschman. In a cool breath city with its grand hills sloping greenly downward to the sea, Bierce and Hart the twain did meet, and Stevenson discovered a port of entry to another world, to an earlier epic on his voyage to Treasure Island. And when Wilde, the wild Irish prose poet playwright, disappeared, it was said that he was seen in San Francisco, where Conan Doyle deduced that it's hardly fair to blame America for San Francisco, as its seaport attracts the floating vice of the Pacific. And Kipling found a mad city, sadly heartless, but inhabited, for the most part, by perfectly insane people whose women were of a remarkable beauty. And Norris composed A Tale of the City, where McTeague explored life in Polk Gulch before finding death in Death Valley. But when Sterling wandered across the borders of beauty and mystery and into a cool gray city of love, where he was arrested for being in the company of an undraped woman, he paid his fine, not with sterling silver, but with Sterling's poetry. And London was not on the embankment of the Thames, but on 3rd Street long before he followed the call of the wild. And Frost was on the hills of San Francisco many years before he took the road less traveled by. And Hammett had a fictional spade unearthed the truth in a cool noir city where most things can be bought or taken. And Steinbeck alleged that he fledged in San Francisco, climbed its hills, slept in its parks, worked on its docks, marched in its revolts. And Soroyan is said to have said that San Francisco itself is literature, every block a short story, every hill a novel, and every home a poem. Yet Rexroth had it with cheap sons of bitches who claim they love poetry but never buy a book, while Patchen painted poems and coalesced words with music, improvising jazz and poetry with sense for the senses, and Antoninus, once a brother, ever a son, was beat to the square and square to the beat, and an anagrammatical Norris penned memoirs of a bastard angel, extolling the flame of desire and of love, of sex and of beauty, as we burned with pleasure, but burn out in time. And the apostate Thomas wrote in an epistle, you wouldn't think that such a place as San Francisco could exist. The wonderful sunlight, the hills, the great bridges, the Pacific at your shoes, every race in the world, and good wine and beer. But Spicer, a poet of one-night stanzas, was one of the other people besides Thomas who died looking for beauty in the world of the bartender. and Ginsberg howled in a Frisco hilly tin can vision of angel-headed hipsters burning for the ancient heavenly connection to the starry dynamo in the machinery of night. An arresting poem that Ferlinghetti was arrested for publishing. However, despite his strong convictions, he was not convicted, but instead signaled through the flames that the world calls out for poetry to save it. And Lamantia, in the perfect image of a priest, having found that heavenly connection, floated toward the endless-looking universe, and Wayland, while in the Japanese tea garden, pondered the absolute permanence of the most impossibly fragile, delicate, and fleeting objects, and Cassidy, the holy conman with a shining mind, perceived that some events are in the area of the soul where words cannot penetrate. Meanwhile, Kerouac had come, not yet to the end of the road, but to the end of the land sadness, the end of the world gladness, and a prophecy that all you San Franciscos will have to fall eventually and burn again. Still, Kaufman emerged from the inferno of the Hotel Dante and into the crackling blueness of ancient rain, and Corso cursed in a gasoline, love-injected alley in the shadow of a coital tower as his verse rained down on him from a window above. It seems that his poems, if not the poet, had been freed from the attic, while Welsh, guided by voices descending from the naked air, drove the cab of heaven into the San Francisco night. Ah, city, he could have told you how it was to stalk your streets. And Michelin, a silver-tongued poet of the streets, of the road, of the vagabond, of the dreamers, and of the dancers, sang the songs of the unsung, and McClure read, or rather roared, to the lions in the San Francisco Zoo, as if in a holy supplication, and the lions roared back as if in a holy litany response, while Weiss shared the Weisheit that we are sparks in the universe to our own fire, and although it may seem that the past has passed, what happened back then is all part of now. But Kiger declared that the best thing about the past is that it's over, and when you die you wake up from this dream that's been your life. Yet Angelou understood that one always carries the dreams, the fears, the dragons of home under one's skin, and yet to her, San Francisco was a state of beauty and freedom. Meanwhile, Candel burned like a fabulous Romana candle, like meteors of light flaming through wordless skies, until there was nothing left but the smell of love, but the taste of love, but the fact of love. But Kesey proclaimed, "To hell with facts, we need stories." And as his story goes, the hate was just a place. The 60s was a spirit, and you're either on the bus or off the bus. Further, A Wolf at the Golden Gate chronicled the on-the-bus mystic brotherhoods road-tripping down the day-glow and neon of the electric Kool-Aid Highway of America. And still further, Didion was in that place, the hate, during the spring of love, while anarchy was loosed upon the world and missing children were slouching towards meth mayhem. Still, Thompson observed that in San Francisco, life goes on, hope rises, dreams flicker and die, and love plans for tomorrow. However, Creeley posited that time reoccurs, and an echo of time passes love in the dark, while Brodigan foretold that someday time will die and love will bury it. Yet, Prima della Fina, reminded us that we are climbing a circular, undeviating, golden, perfect ladder of ages long forgotten to be told over and over. Like a string of prayer beads, the Ferris wheel has started up again, and when Hirschman, the extinguished professor and well-read red poet, was cast out of the city of angels, as it was not the city of Ingalls, he followed the path to San Francisco, where he urged us, implored us to see the gates opening, to go singing, whirling into the glory of being ecstatically simple, and, of course, to write the poem. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm still stunned by, brilliant. Yeah, what can I say? But oh, Keith, oh my goodness, my goodness.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Too much, yeah.
No, that was really quite extraordinary. Not only the material, but the way you presented it. Very gratifying. Oh my God. Yeah, let's see if I can collect myself here, because I'm very excited to be able to introduce Andrena Zawinski, who is a native of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, for various reasons, a city very close to my heart, even though I think I was only in the airport one time. But for many different reasons, including the fact that the Pittsburgh Pirates, who along with the Giants were one of my teams growing up, in the early 70s, they had their starting lineup, 9 players. They went out in the field, and the story was they looked at one another and realized every single player was black or Latino. And that was one of those things. And I loved all those guys as players. And it was like, I thought, wow, Pittsburgh, they got something positive going on in Pittsburgh. And they also had of the great black newspapers, which were in the early part of the century, which were very prominent. Pittsburgh, was it the Courier? Yeah. Just awesome level of journalism and awareness, and decades ahead of their time. So yeah, Andrena's she has 4 collections of poetry, including one, the most recent one, which I love the title, Born Under the Influence. I love that. And she's done a lot of things that, I think she was characterized by someone as a poet of social awareness and responsibility, which is always a very significant factor in successful poetry, as we all know, to indulge the imagination, but also situate it in the context of all the other things that make our lives important and bearable. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Andrena.
Way up at your forehead. That's going to be fine. It'll pick you up
Thanks.
right from there.
Well, as Keith said, this is an important day, Day of the Dead, and I wanted to start with a poem honoring a poet that I love, Pablo Neruda. This poem is the form is sort of a surrealistic narrative, but it's also part cento because it has lines from a few of his poems, from Neruda's poems. So when his words come, I'll just put my hand up. Dancing with Neruda's bones. Neruda, only known to me in the poet's words, I love you as certain dark things are to be loved, in secret, between the shadow and the soul. Neruda's bones have been exhumed for examination. I did not want his decomposed body uprooted from its plot, transmogrified into murder mystery. Poet of eternal present, I cradle his imagined bones and pull them to me, his tango body's phalanges jangling as I cross and gyro, tibia and fibula, pinned by the sun between solstice and equinox, drowsy and tangled together, clanking across tiles of a kitchen floor. Let Neruda be, I please, still dancing, his bones tethered to my body, tripping and swaying in tango rhythm, talking head on the radio, droning on in conspiracy theories of the Pinochet regime, poisoning Neruda. Life split in poetry and politics, as the night wind whirls in the sky and sings. Forecast of ill fortune to lift bones from the grave, much like this wave of melancholy. In inevitable surrender, I concede, what's it matter to have dug them up? As his love lyrics resonate in his monotone groan, Gardel crooning behind our bumpy boleo, El dia que me quieras. Neruda's unearthed skeleton clings to my arms, scent of honeysuckle climbing limbs like vines, as I sweep and dip inside his metaphoric sigh of sea and our final sultata, voice of the rain crying. No carnations for me, only a wound that love had opened. Neruda, now so mystical and magical, cloaks his bones in flesh and play, conjures a dusty fiddle, leaps and lands on the walkway below. The violin with its ragged companion, learning how to befriend lost souls and sing songs to wandering strangers. This book, Born Under the Influence, starts out with a poem about how I was born under medical practices of overly drugged mother. But the influences are many in the book. Almost all the poems sit in the lap of some social issue. And I'm going to start with, why is this not opening right? This poem, I'll go to Paris too in this one. It mentions a cafe called La Belle Équipe, meaning the good team, and it was run by a couple who was Muslim and Christian. Crossing boundaries. We tipped wine glasses to Paris, Bastille Day, whirled and twirled each other across the walk, swung into the street, two women travelers, smiling and laughing, until the hems of our skirts were singed by firecrackers tossed at our feet by men demanding dances we would not give. Women in hijabs pulled us into a cloistered corner of sisters inside La Belle Équipe, encircled us, showed us how to position hands, extend arms, as if to shove away looming shadows of their guardians and husbands, crossing boundaries of difference for what we share, and where, years later, extremists with Kalashnikovs would spray bullets into crowds along that same Rue de Charonne, its sidewalk turned altar of flowers, candles, sentiments, and tears, women embracing each other, trying to hold the world together, bound in courage and fear. This is a poem that Jack Hirschman particularly liked, and I was very fortunate to have him be one of the people that blurbed this book in praise of it. It was written on International Day of Elimination of Violence Against Women, and the information in it comes from a variety of world news reports. It's called Femicide. They marched in Chile, red hands painted across their mouths. They covered their mouths with purple hands in Argentina. They dressed in black in Uruguay, raised signs bearing murdered women's names. They placed red shoes on the ground for all the victims in Belgium. They hung stuffed animals in Honduras from clothesline, memorializing the dead. They laid under sheets in Panama, toes tagged, soy tu novia, soy tu mamá. They wrote Stop 138 on spread palms in France for those killed by their partners this year. They lit up in a blaze of red lights the Palazzo Madama in Italy. They marched in Spain, carrying crosses for women murdered by men who loved them. They clashed in Turkey with riot police, their batons and their mace. They chanted everywhere, freedom, peace, justice. Well, there's femicide and there's genocide. This poem has some totem images, Native American totem images or First People images, eagle, owl, mountain lion, and so forth. It's in the Malaysian form of the pantun where the second and fourth lines are repeated as first and third of the next quatrain. But for the, I chose this form, I like this form for poems that seem to require a repetition that gives it a kind of mood. I want to tell you a little bit about what this these shoes are about. The artist Tamara Bell placed shoes on Vancouver Art Gallery steps to memorialize 215 school ground remains in a mass grave at Canada's Kamloops Indian Residential School project for a European assimilation. And since then, thousands more have been unearthed, and not just in Canada, but in the United States as well. And the shoes, oh, I lost it, huh? The shoes are important because something that they did was they used to take the kids' shoes from them at night. A Dakota friend of mine told me, so that they couldn't run away. I have to find it again. Let me see. I took my little marker away. Okay, got it. Kamloops Shoes Pantoum. The voices of ancestors are smothered in sleep, where footless shoes climb steps in memoriam, 215 pairs of shoes enshrined for school children, their First Nations presence preserved. Where footless shoes climb steps in memoriam, beneath the wingspan of the golden-eyed eagle, their First Nation presence is preserved by invisible feet in little shoes that pace a legacy, beneath the wingspan of the golden-eyed eagle, soaring and hovering over a mass grave, invisible feet in little shoes pace a legacy, in the hoo-hoo-hoot of owls in the wind, soaring and hovering over a mass grave, shape-shifting mountain lion prowling grounds, in the hoo-hoo-hoot of owls in the wind, wandering ghosts torn from their tribes, shape-shifting mountain lion prowling grounds, 215 pairs of shoes enshrined for school children, wandering ghosts torn from their tribes, the voices of ancestors smothered in sleep. This is called Unholy Triptych for New Immigrants, and at the end of each of the three short stanzas are words from Emma Lazarus's New Colossus that's on the pedestal of the Statue of Liberty. Madres, women forced to spread their legs and open their mouths to coyotes in deserts, or inside shipping containers, or hooked to Mack trucks, husbands and children torn from them. You're tired, you're poor. Padres. Men in safe houses along the long route, brave borders, starved and beaten, badgered and bullied, berated as bad hombres and drug-dealing animals, yearning to breathe free. Niños, child after child dies in the shallows and the sands, or sweating and shivering, crying themselves to sleep, caged in chain-link pens, garlic tied to their shoes to ward off snakes. No lamp beside a golden door. I'm a second-generation Polish-Ukrainian and grew up in the culture in Pittsburgh. My grandmother used to sing this song to me, Ochi Chornya, Ochi Krasnya, and it's considered a Romany Russian folk ballad that was really originally written by a Ukrainian poet. And it means, Ochi Chornya means dark eyes. So this is called Dark Eyes, an elegy for Ukraine. And in it I also use symbols of the Ukraine, the trident, the flag, the sunflowers, that sort of thing. I have a quote from the Polish Pulitzer Prize-winning poet Szymborska as the epigraph. Whatever I do will become forever what I have done. The girl's family gathers at the kitchen table. Her box of colored pencils and pad of paper that praise the beauty of nightingales and trees packed away with a book of verse and trident charm wrapped inside a silky blue-yellow flag. Potatoes simmer on the stove to mash, to stuff piroguito. But now they make Molotov cocktails, fill shell casings, balk at air raid sirens, and booms in a blood-red sky bleeding down on stuffed satchels, made ready to cross some border, any border. The girl's baba, just outside the window, braves a soldier, hands him a fistful of sunflower seeds, implores him to put down his gun to plant them. While others deliver curses and spells, she sings, O Chichornia, the street thickening with the fog of ghosts who have come, who are about to come. I came across this somewhere on Facebook, this quote by Salman Rushdie. A poem cannot stop a bullet. A novel can't defuse a bomb. But we are not helpless. We can sing the truth and name the liars. Bullets. Bullets. Their brassy caps glinting golden in the dark, ammo tray tucked under a student's study desk, more bullets in a bandolier crisscrossing the chest, bullets maneuvered across a screen in slugs of anger and angst, in bullet launchers, landmines of bullets, bullets of the slain, in a shooting game. Bullets. Their powder-packed cartridges of panic and fear, hollow points shattering identities, blasts sounding in sleep, bullets of grief from a spray of hate. Bullets that silence at windows, on lawns, on street corners, in schoolrooms, supermarkets, factories, churches, all turned altars of flowers, candles, placards, and prayers, while bullets fill bank accounts of makers and regulators, dodging bullets whistling by, shells jingling in pockets like loose change to be spent in puddles of blood. Bullets, their full metal jackets dug from the corpse with a legacy of wounds. Bullets that pierced flesh, shattered bone, riddled the heart and all the wild in it, depositing dreams to urns and coffins buried in holes in dirt, screams smothered, breaths sealed. We also lost the great poet Gerald Stern, who it was my great pleasure to know, if ever so briefly. In his poem, The Dancing, he just says this simple line, O God of mercy, O wild God. This is called Temples. Holy temple in the Sinai fallen, sacred mosque and Mosul desecrated, pagan temples of Alexandria downed, Hindu temples leveled by fire, Buddhist temples shattered, Guyana temple poisoned. One more racial warrior heeds coded whistle calls from the storm front of the White House in a language of fear. One more fist flung high, flags heaved and flaunted before burning crosses. Pittsburgh Tree of Life Synagogue, a massacre of the reverent. Churches ablaze in St. Landry Parish, houses of worship riddled by bullets from Escondido to New Zealand, temples invaded and defiled in splatters of human blood, temples toppled by hate, and then one more, one more, one more. O God, O wild God, have mercy. I'll end with one. Oops. I'll end with one for the Day of the Dead. Altarpiece. Children empty the mother's house of her, muscles aching from the weight of her loss, held in their arms, so close to their hearts. Light a candle for them. Neighbors bemoan an old man lost just blocks from his home. No one ever reported him missing. Pray on beads for them. Strangers, heads darting this way and that, circle a young man on the tracks who slipped into a heap crossing the street. Petition the saints for them. Light a candle for them. Light a candle for girls who gave birth in the dark the way they conceived, buried stillborns in deep graves of grief. Bury your face in your hands for them. And for the parents whose children fell to open school ground fire, who uprooted wither upon the blood-soaked earth, lay down wreaths of marigolds for them. Ring bells for them. Ring bells for women pack at the heels with knife, brick, and pipe, who dropped in the dark, wrapped into sleep, then forgot. Cover the mirrors for them. Ring bells for the men who balk at the buck of the rifle butt, drop guns and run, rogues cast out from the pack. Raise flags for them, free doves for them. And for those with bodies bound by rope, throats gagged with rags, backs strapped and lashed, their cries silenced, open a window for them. Deliver oblations for them, for all the apocalyptic visionaries who leapt to their ends from bridge rails or slept drunken on fumes in the room in a blanket of death. Burn incense for them. Sing chants at altars you create for them. Carve their names deep into stone you erect to them. Let their ashes take wings on the wind for them. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, Jerry, I guess you have a list of the readings. Anyone who
Yes, we
wants to be
have.
part of the open reading can
There's
still sign up.
three names on the open list. Anybody else want to read?
Yes, you're welcome to join.
I just want to say, if anybody wants to buy a book, take it through, do it through Eric, because I like to support the bookstore that way.
Yes, and we'll take a 5 to 10 minute break, and then we'll have the open session. Very nice, yes. Man, man.
Great, man. Great reading.
No, I don't. But I'm
All right, Eric, are we all set? Oh, the lights, I forgot, yeah. All right, we're going to proceed to the second portion of the evening after that fabulous featured set. So I'm going to read a couple of things. You know, for those of you who are on the older side, should I say, you probably understand the drawbacks of aging, but of course, there are also some pleasures that we often minimize. And putting together recently a manuscript of including older work, I realized, wow, you get to a certain age and you can look at a poem you've written 50 years ago. And I thought, wow, that's kind of an interesting perspective to have. And this is something that I probably wrote, like around 50 years ago. And it's from the vantage point to someone who's about to turn 80 years old. And of course, at that point, I was in my mid-20s, and I had little idea what it meant to be getting close to 80 years old. But this is entitled Every Night. My mother was Chinese. My father, the scourge of the merchant marine. I remember when Siam was still Siam and wild boars roamed Little Rock, what the cabbage smelled like, sleek rats, the ceramic Buddha I smashed with a baseball. My sister smoked Australian cigarettes, or does memory deceive me? When the Archduke was assassinated, Rabbit Moranville played shortstop for the Boston Braves. Correct me if I'm wrong. I've got a passion for strong tobacco. Once a Texan tried to kill me for my boots. Do you realize how hard it is to keep a secret? What time is it? I'll be 80 this summer, and I dream every night of old wine.
Wait, you're not 80 years old.
No, come on. I'm metaphorical 80 in my 20s, you know. I've always been 80. My Rocket 88, come on now. This is entitled New Year's 2020. And of course, New Year's 2020 was a terrifying and fraught time, and like every New Year's. So there you go. This is first the bad news. The gods are dead as doornails, and the dogs are dragging too. The cats have traded their feline gravitas for fancy pajamas. The flora have turned on the fauna, and archangels envy the moths. Our cheeks are gray, our moon's out of tune, and ghouls are trampling the tulips. And now for the good news. The sun rose this morning with flirtatious halftones, full throttle of flame. It wore a top hat and blood-red shoes, a pandemonium of billowing parachutes and glossy crows like black diamonds. What scintillating silence, what clanging bells! God is relinquishing her grip on heaven and finally refurbishing hell.
Thank you, Michael. Excellent. Excellent. That's what I'm talking. Okay, I've got, I think 4 poems. Not terribly long. And, also a poem I want to read of another poet who I knew. This is called The Grocery Lady. In her shining t-shirt, different every day, to provide a little entertainment or food for thought, governing the day. Whatever you think you need, she's got it, knowing the habits and taste of the neighborhood. Like in the old San Francisco, which was all about its different neighborhoods, where everyone knew everyone and didn't lock their doors. The corner store was the mainstay and social center of the neighborhood, where all the locals gathered to exchange news, gossip, and chit-chat. So whatever brand or product you're looking for, or just some wise advice for living right, and who knows, maybe she'll even fix a protection for you. But rain or shine, though the weather in our fair city may change on a dime, she's open for business. Okay, this one's called Pop Satori. Satori is like a Zen word. It's like actually it's a Sanskrit word. In Japanese, it's kensho, which means a sudden jutting out, like a mountaintop. Okay, Pop Satori. Sprawled across my bed, when pop goes my head. Baby with a sudden bang so loud my whole bod shook loose. There, in the deepest sense, in its essence, all was but a bodiless blackness in the round, the very picture of emptiness, where you keep your cake and eat it too, where even without a dime to my name, spring jumps in, with its wordless wisdom, everywhere I turn, a miracle, the light of everyday, ordinary life, and the light of ordinary life and everyday affairs, and the saving grace of these immaculate blossoms blooming in my fragrant garden upon awakening from this mirror-like dream. And this poem, I might have even read it last month. Into this thing, it's the Jolly Buddha. You know the it's called Ho Tai. He was kind of the Chinese Santa Claus. Buddha. And you must have seen it with his hands. This big fat Buddha with his hands up like that. So it's okay, the Jolly Buddha. Enlightenment, true laughter, comes from within, from deep within the Buddha's belly, from detachment, free from entanglement in things, 'cause life is all too funny. And you notice he's got tits too, and the bit about the long earlobes is that the Buddha was royalty, Prince Siddhartha of Nepal. His family wore heavy gold earrings. Removing them was a sign of his humility, renouncing his social status and standing alone without fear, grinning from ear to ear, holding up the sky, both hands raised up high, holding up the sky for everyone. So rub my tummy for good luck and never lose your sense of humor, that faculty divine, heaven's way of protecting us against the stress of life, which can kill you. But laughter is a celebration and affirmation of life, the song of the chuckling brook, though it remains a mystery, even if we don't know why. It just comes bursting forth out of nowhere. Yeah. Now I've got this poem that I want to read, which was written by Philip Whalen, the beat poet. He was a very good Zen teacher. I used to go. His predecessor was this guy Isan, who was in showbiz. He was a drag queen, and he opened this little Zen place in the Castro. And I grew up in the Castro. I was from there, but in the 1950s and 60s. But anyway, I used to go and sit with them. They had a little Zendo in the Castro, and listen to his Zen lectures, which were really interesting. Anyway, he wrote this beautiful poem called Tara. And Tara is like a Tibetan deity, like a female Buddha is what it is. And okay, Tara, this bronze lady represents the Lady of Heaven whom I now invoke. That idea of wisdom that saves not only itself and me, all the universes. Enlighten us. We murder each other in this night. Our eyes will tell us nothing but fear. All the universes, all the probability tracks, immediately. Her hands form the mudra, teaching the law, explaining herself. She also appears as a song, a diagram, as a pile of metal images in the marketplace, Kathmandu. We seldom treat ourselves right. Thank you. So we have very short open list, but anything goes at the Beckett. Okay, Bernard.
Don't applaud yet. I have one little short poem here, and then a biographical short prose poem, you might call it, and that's about it for tonight for me. This is called Racetrack. We stand there together on the railing, screaming together, just as the horse's pounding hoofs cross the finish line. He turns to me, drapes his arm around my shoulder, looks straight into my eyes, shows me his ticket clutched in his hand, and says, "Look, you tell me now. I had the 2-horse, second in the exacta, on a hunch, and the damn thing comes in to win. Go ahead, you can tell me now. You're my friend. Why didn't I bet the damn thing to win?" I put my arm around him also. We stand there together, smiling at each other. All the while, I wonder to myself, who the hell is this guy? And this is a biographical short prose piece called Remembering Fort Ross on the Summer Solstice. You probably know Fort Ross is up in Sonoma County on the coast there, where the Russians back in the 1800s came down. That's as far south as they got at that time. And this is basically a true story. Remembering Fort Ross on the summer solstice. I was a small boy the first time I came here, surf fishing with my father at Jenner by the sea. The fort was neglected and unkept. It was the Cold War 50s of air raid alerts, bomb shelters, and McCarthy witch hunts on our black and white TV. I felt a strange, ghostly anxiety that day, thinking Russians had lived here in the forest by the ocean. Godless, evil, frightening Russians. They wanted to take over the world. I read this where I lived in the local Concord Transcript newspaper while searching for my Little League baseball scores. The fort looked like my plastic toy cavalry set I played cowboys and Indians with in the backyard. There was a stockade surrounded by high timber wood walls. Years later, in 1970, I returned as a young man with my girlfriend. We were two wandering souls, rudderless baby boomers, disillusioned peace and love idealists, lost and shipwrecked by the Vietnam War. The fort was still run down and in disrepair. We camped below the bluffs off a dirt road where a creek emptied into a small cove. We slept on the ground, stayed up late listening to the ocean, gazing at the stars as they drifted across the sky. The next morning, park rangers and a sheriff woke us at twilight, red lights flashing on their trucks. There was smoke rising from the cliff above us. An arsonist had set fire to the fort, burnt down the wooden chapel, turning during the night, and wrote in graffiti, "We hate commies," all over the wooden walls. The officers checked our IDs, asked us if we had seen anything. Then they told us to leave. Instantly, we threw our sleeping bags into the VW bug, sputtered back up the dirt road to the coast highway, and vanished. Today, it is nearly a half century later. I visit on the summer solstice. The fort has been rebuilt. Controversy surrounds the restoration. No onion dome, too Americanized. In this time, the Cold War has gone and come back again with a vengeance. Peace and love is nothing but a lost, naive, commodified caricature of the 60s. There's a parking lot and a comfortable modern visitor center next to the cypress grove. In the last of the afternoon sunlight, I watch a covey of quail feed near the wooden windmill. All but the largest male scurry away in danger when I walk near. Danger. The bold bird gives back my stare, top knot quivering on his head. He looks to see if his covey is safe. Then he slowly backs off, moves away, and disappears into the brush. For a moment, I recall the uneasy feelings of the past when I visited here. But today, Fort Ross is a nice, peaceful place, and these feelings slip away and vanish like the covey of quail. Two red-tailed hawks glide and circle on the updraft above my head. On the bluff, I see a few people. They gaze out across the wide ocean. There's no fog today. These people appear small against the great immensity of the water. I can almost feel the curvature of the globe bend, circle around in a sphere, and return to where we stand on this single planet. Today I stop and rest here while the sun goes down over the Pacific. This time of year, on the longest day, it sets peacefully far to our northwest, on the other side of our world, maybe somewhere near Vladivostok, Russia. And I think to myself, maybe even there, people are watching a peaceful morning sunrise far to their east and feel the curvature of the earth like I do as it circles around in a sphere on our one single planet. Thank you.
Brett Benson, please.
That's good. Okay. 3 short ones and then a little piece. Paradigm shifts. Sin is pure fiction. Mythology seen as facts. Find your truest self. That's the first one. The second one is cosmic breath. The universe doesn't judge you. You judge yourself. The thoughts are not some outside force. They are your own. Thus, I can explore why my thoughts come up and not judge myself, but learn and grow. Thanks. Third one, written recently with all that's going on. Before. Before identity, before characteristics, before Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, or any other sect. Before Democrat or Republican, before sex or orientation, before economic acquisition, before friend or enemy, before good or evil, before the formation of cities, armies, or gods, before prescribed labels, I am. And then this one, I don't know if any of you guys knew him, but there was a gentleman named Richard May who called himself the Actor, who had been here a couple of times. I don't know if you've heard through the loop, but unfortunately he passed away last Saturday in a car accident. Yeah. So here's a short piece, and I have my timer. Here's a short piece for him. Hey, how you doing? I gotta go right now. I'll see you down the road. I don't know where, and I don't know how, and I don't know when. But I hope to see you down there. I gave you everything I could on the stage, from Shakespeare to monologues to love. I gave you everything inside that I have, the spirit of me honoring the spirit within you. The stage was my playground. I was finally finding my way after years of suffering. I had my first show, my one-man show, with the African American Shakespeare community. But they called me home. I don't know where. I don't know why. Pure chance. And I don't know when I'll see you again. But I hope I kept you entertained. I hope that my voice, my very high-pitched yet beautiful voice, kept you out of your suffering for just 1 minute. I'll see you again. I don't know where, and I don't know how, but I hope to. I'll see you down the road. Keep acting. Keep writing. Keep loving this dream we have. Thank you very much.
Okay, Paul Slade.
Hey, thanks, Jerry. Thanks, Michael, Eric. I have ideas about, we all do, about time and place. And there's a lot of San Francisco words tonight. And it's always thought it was ironic that the Republican Party had the convention here in 1964. Things change. This is called RV Cowboys. Some retired hippies moved to Tombstone, Arizona, wearing tie-dyed and 10-gallon hats. Sanguine about saguaros, they flipped free-range flapjacks. They played with armadillos. The old residents of Time and Place, Kiwanis Club cowboys in range boots and Stetsons, were more alarmed than a 5-starred spicy chili and a cook-off about the influx of the scragglers, benign desperados. They opined at bingo about the splatterings of paintballs in the Barnum and Bailey high noon docudrama showdowns, replacing the fusillades from Colt 44s. They pondered whether Wavy Gravy would marry Prankster, the deadly drama at the OK Corral. Would the porcelain innocence of their darling Clementines be compromised, dancing bonnet-free, mesmerized by Grateful Dead rituals? Plugged-in traveling troubadours on the chicken wing circuit lamented in dirges about the newcomers, weird, wacky, apostles of new traditions. Then they would continue their odes to pickup trucks, pink carnation infidelities, and alcohol by volume fisticuffs. They would ponder, what would Paladin do? Whiskey wanderlust in the saloons. The originals would drive to their irrigated suburbs before the golf course. The four-wheeling old guard would pass, that iconic symbol of turbulence, the lead-laden Flanders field of infinite conflict resolution, marked with epithets, carved in stone, cold in the sun, in the silence of the cacti. With appropriate gazes, they would shake their heads, wondering, would Boot Hill be replaced by Birkenstock Hill?
And August, please. August, please.
Hi everyone, my name is August Bleed. I'm here representing Bleed Incorporated. We're selling art is tying your ego to a leash and walking it like a dog. I normally don't read poems right after I wrote them, but I was kind of in the middle of it on my way here, so I figured I would read it anyway. That's my dog, by the way. That's Donica there. Donica, yeah. She's very sweet. I wake in my dream in the house keeping our memories, residing here quiet as a ghost, west of impossible, the window where I watched our future ripening in the past. What past, no longer present, and the future is addled with amnesia. Like an alchemist, you disappeared around the first corner until I could no longer see you leaving, gone for the last time. Few things are left overtly reminding me of you, the largest being your absence, flattening your shape in the futon we shared. Sleeping back to back, vicariously plotting the latest episode of Dateline like conspirators, listening to the history of divorce by murder in Pasco and Hillsborough counties in Florida. I wonder which of us might be charged, who would command the larger bail. I know how to extract your ghosts from the shadows others overlook, to see your faint echo growing fainter on the corner where we kissed goodbye, that intersection where we embraced and where our paths diverged. I listen, for what is left of you is always fainter. Even your delicate fingers, which I memorized by touch. Your mother's fingers, your father's biceps, the lilt of your grandmother's song, chanting at the bees while she gathered honey with no suit. It's there in the presence of your voice. The honeyed remnants of your taste in my mouth has soured, and everywhere I go, I don't know who I am. Every night I sleep in a graveyard where they dig holes for your fiction. What I mean cannot deflect the definitive punctuation signaling the end of a moment, ephegized into words. The space words occupy is the fiction of thoughts, where moments stumbling drunk on locust gas are left by morning hungover, sipping fentanyl soup in the blood, lacking oxygen, ejaculates reconstituted dopamine onto your sorest need you can no longer feed. It was on this morning, someone on the bus noticed that the sun had fallen from the sky. Nothing was open except that which never closed. Your body eventually pays for the hours you borrow to escape death, and you're left to drag what remains to salvage the ingredients needed to inform a new sentience. When the sun shut off that morning, I could hear the end of time passing in whispers from person to person, cackling in the morning's sudden darkness. Hours compose these walls where the door erupts in flame, the only exit. This is the hour. Donica, hello, darling. Come on up here. This is the hour when you finally grasp that words will not save you, but their echoes will exhaust history trying to be heard. Ghosts surface in the hours you and I lost, always looking for the shadow shed where the black earth, Donica, darling, where the black earth is blackest and swallowed what death needn't have for its nourishment. When we dragged what was left of our rotten meat, the remains of the city emptied of residents, fear moved around those heavy spirits that remained, your 6 senses by way of 5 fingers. Greed was the pandemic we faced that consumed the last of the toilet paper, not fenced or scalped to the highest bidder. But drugs were never constrained by things like supply chains. They responded only to demand, and addicts everywhere demanded a plethora of pharmacopoeia of pure abandon. I have been hiding 7 words that will kill me once spoken, once they tumble out like a dumb stone at the edge of a prepuce. I live with the onerous certainty of who put them there, in that order, with the fear of what might spill out in the service of a bloody word, the desperate language of raw meat. Thank you.
Okay, and our last but not least, our house philosopher, Walker Brent.
Okay, thank you, Jared. Yeah, thank you. I think we're working. It's like this. We're all coming out. It's nothing but what has always been going on, but we can delineate like a focus of it. We're coming out. We are coming toward each other in a democratic way, of a pandemic, of the aftermath of a pandemic, of the debacle of a society gone mad. Of a political system that has collapsed. And it's not all that new in human history. But here we are, and we are responding. And I love you because I know that in your poems, O poets, you are bringing forth in your own, I want to say an open secret language, you are bringing forth from your inner self, an offering to the community. And that's just true. So this poem goes, present company accepted not. The mystics have the keys, but they don't know how to use them. The realists know how to use the keys, but they don't have them. This is for those who don't care, but do. And so, partially it's dedicated to Donica, You know, and so chance has made it be this way. So you forced me, or Donica challenged me, I guess, to tell you this, because this is the poem that I will tell you now, the poem that I will tell you that has the word in it that you will recognize when we get to it by the second line. It's in the title, for what it's worth, is called Management of Primal Savings. All right, and it goes like this: the wrong sequence of letters turns God into dog. Then instantly you slip the bonds of justice and wander, wondering of spaniels and shepherds and puppies and thumbprints in your chicken soup, made by no thumb in the kitchen or fluke of the soup. And it could go on like this for for the next 1,000 years, So find your sternum in sternness, and charming as a snake. And charming as a snake, yet, and I want to say, and charming as a snake, yet innocent as a dove. Be graceful and grateful, for the snake catcher has a dove perched on his arm to remind him, if he moves too slow, the dove is not safe. And if he thinks or moves too fast, then the dove could escape. This is for our balance and the uncertainty of our balance. And so now I'll just tell you this poem. It is called Making Doing Be. And it could also be called True Confessions, because it goes, I make believe to make belief into being something I can believe in. I make believe to make belief into being something I can believe in. And always it comes out of our mouths from within us, and we put it forth, and it will work in the world, because we are bringing our thoughts poetically into the arena of democracy, and it's still possible, and we're still doing it. So God bless us.
Well, thanks, Andrena and Keith, and thanks for all coming out and listening to us, and we'll be here next month. We have first Thursday of the month, and so do we know who's coming up? Where's Michael?
Who's coming up next is Lisa Bernstein, and I can't recall who was reading with her. I'm not sure she's chosen.
Okay, anyway, look us up, so thank you for coming. So it's not out. Maybe out.
I'm coveting that sweatshirt. I love the art on the back.
Oh, Vesuvio, yeah.
Yes, you did.
That's good.
That's at her home as well.
Oh, really?
She just discovered her voice in the last year.
That's wonderful.
And she's going on 14.
Quite seriously, that's
Yeah.
you can never have too much of that.
So it's kind of new to her.
Yeah.
She's really fond of it.
Yeah, have you read much out? You have, huh?
Yeah, but I've been reading lately, like in places like Sacramento, Modesto. I'm going to Petaluma, Big Sur, Pacific Grove. So I've been reading a lot.
Great, yeah.
But I've read here quite a few times in the last few years. But not while you've been here with the series. She's asked me to read it.
Sweetie, sweetie baby.
Yeah, well, I
Do you
think
live close by?
getting to know
Do you live
Keith a
close
lot
by?
better. He likes to go over to Northeast. He always offers me a on
So
on
are
route
you
there
driving or
to
something?
a ride over there.
The bar,
I don't
the
know
boss.
if you.
Yeah, I'm over in
Sophia,
Alameda, so I don't get to the city all that much.
She's been riding the bus for about
Like it
14
took-
years
Yeah,
now. So
Yeah, oh, okay,
across the
good.
courage today.
Unbelievable.
Look at her, she's such a gorgeous.
It wasn't like there was a record or
Yeah,
anything like that, you
She's
know.
going on like 15 now.
Mm,
so
I know.
it's kind of
Yeah, they slow
So
down.
we'll see you again then.
tenuous
Yeah.
moment.
Okay.
Yeah, you just have to adore her and love her.
Yeah, I take her with me.
Mm-hmm.
I was surprised she didn't just come up to the
Missing
stage.
Jack
Yeah, well, I think she
Hirschman.
wanted to be there.
Yeah.
Yeah, she usually just walks up there.
No, go ahead. Yes. The bathroom, dogs.
So you walking over? You wanna?
I'm gonna walk down home. Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to walk on through
Yeah.
the cities? All right.
What I can do is, I'll give you this thing, but what I can do also give you a whole month long thing by email.
Bye. Thank you again.
Thank you. You wanna go home with me? I have a dog, but he's not very friendly with other dogs, unfortunately. But he loves people.
You're very tails? Wow.
You know, and I've never actually read Marie. I've always heard of her, of course, but
I've read her, yeah.
that is
August,
so, you know,
see you in
it's,
September.
Yes.
All right,
we should be
Danica.
buying books, but we'll
Danica?
go ahead. Are you heading back to Pittsburgh on the BART?
Yep.
Oh, thank you very much. Okay, and I gotta give you a check.
So I just went through a month of jury duty.
Do you happen
Sure
to?
did, yeah.
Oh,
month.
that I can?
Yes, there was a piece of work, man.
Uh-huh.
Modesto versus
I could probably look good, figure it out, but
You want to join?
I
Yes,
have-
I was.
yeah, I bet that's covered.
So we-
Okay.
I believe I got that email, haven't I?
Well, look, you did,
Oh,
right?
yes.
So
cheers,
Out of
thank you.
curiosity.
here's your 2-week schedule.
Okay, that's great.
I know, yeah, I'll
I
have to, but I'll
appreciate
just
it.
Yeah,
listen
sure,
at
well, I
this point.
appreciate you wanting it.
You know,
You got,
Oh, that's
it's
great.
you can read it
beautiful
twice
to
because
work
it's
with
the
a
same
Democratic
as
community
it
that's
is on
fantastic.
I got two arms.
That's what a jury
Yeah,
is.
good, excellent.
But I was one of two.
Just don't rip it in half.
I won't.
Okay. All right, so 18,
Decided what if I lost, but at least
$12 plus
stand on my word.
plus 1080.
Boring?
So that's
Boring? It was boring and
22.
everything
So
else.
now
It was
if I find a
tedious,
pen.
it was fascinating, it was dramatic, it was.
But yeah, it was great reading.
Intense,
That was
taxing,
really nice.
Material there.
but very worthwhile. I know that, you know, and I knew it then, and I still know it now. Remembering years from now, I'll probably be doing more.
Oh, I
So that means it's really meaningful.
Okay, so those are books. That's a bookstore expense. So you get two different color charts. One on the bookstore and one on the. Is that the most excitement you've had in the last 4 minutes?
That's a good, the most excited I've had in the last 4 minutes. I'm gonna use that somehow.
So what did I say? 2280.
Yeah.
What a nice figure that is. Okay, today being 11/2. Y'all are gonna have a nice smooth ride.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Probably be back in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
We can't get on the bridge. It is.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and go to the restroom.
Okay, so these are books. Well, this is a yeah, I hope the ownership stuff in Portuguese is good. Just like all that. 10, 11, 3, okay. Yeah, let's do it back. I think captured you well. There we go. Boom, boom, boom.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Nice to see you again.
What's your next gig?
I'm going to Petaluma on Monday.
Uh-huh. Top boat you long time.
No, it's
What
the
month is
river,
that?
it's the
September?
Riverside Ports. They started their live series up again the August
Good.
day.
Oh, can we do it once more?
Yeah,
Okay.
they were zooming, of course, during COVID, so now they're just starting up
So,
live.
interested in, you know,
advance of my inheritance. I can
you were,
get a place up there. So,
That's big, yeah.
yeah.
you know Judge
Yeah.
Garrett Wong?
But it might happen, yeah.
Well, of
Okay,
course,
good.
yeah.
Well, he was the guy.
Is she very
I was
involved
spoke to
in
Judge Feng today.
negotiating with the executor and stuff?
You bet. Okay, good.
Well,
so
he probably take over.
my daughter.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, she gets better.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well,
Okay.
Okay.
Well, cool. I've
Yeah.
got to put out an email tonight, so I'm
I
gonna
understand.
settle back down and do it.
This is
Alright.
my.
But yeah, that was cool. Fun to have you back.
Yeah.
Intro into whatever form of communication.
All right.
I want you to know about this.
Okay, I'll come back over here
So
then.
I'll be right back. Sorry.
Okay.
Sir, do you have a recycling thing back there? Sure. I have this thing.
Oh, you know, we're really about done for the night now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm chasing out the last people.
Fair enough.
Sorry to say.
I'll hit you up tomorrow.
Sure thing. Unless there's something specific you need.
No, I just want to look at your records.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll walk away, so I'll see you tomorrow.
Okay. Yeah.
Good night.
Good night. Okay, so, wow, I succeeded in chasing away a customer. All right. But I'll make a customer out of you yet, Mr. Brent. We are getting closer and closer to customer status. Shadow and evil and fairy tales. Nice. So is this, what's your name?
Marie Louise Von Fox.
She's the one, huh?
Well, you know, I
I mean,
decided
she's one of
right
the
now,
ones.
yeah. And I got 20 right here in cash. But how close does it come to those pieces?
But not close enough. It's the $29.95 book.
Oh!
You get some discount action here, so it's expensive for that. That way.
Well, I have a 10, so
Okay.
I'm not afraid to
Well,
use
you're
it.
getting less and less. You started with a 20 and now you only have
See,
a 10.
this is what happens when you get involved with the legal system.
Yeah, boy, I tell you.
So Eric, yeah, so our jury service completed this afternoon.
Okay, great. So
I have
you,
one.
the sentence or the exoneration has been meted out. The trial is done.
Yep, the trial
So
is
what
done.
was the upshot of the trial? It's a long story.
It should, yeah.
Okay,
Lord,
well,
have
then let's save it.
I was
Okay.
one-
What?
I was one of 2 jurors who were able to come out against Dow Chemicals.
All right.
But
Ooh,
I
this
was
is gonna
only
be
one of
funny.
2. Yeah. But by golly,
You
it
mean
means
10
something.
people wanted to let Dow have their way?
Yes,
Those bastards, those idiots.
yes, but you know, but they got good reason, and I'm telling you, man.
Okay, 2863.
Okay, well, here's some great. You can just give me whatever. You know.
Yeah, I'll give you your change. 60.
Oh, that's what they're called.
I'll give you your change. Here's a small change, and here's a bill.
Okay, a bill. All right.
Bill. Okay.
How much you billing them for?
I'm bilking them. I'm not billing them. I'm bilking them.
Billing.
Okay, so we're kind of good on the travel guide. We're kind of good on the fairy tale book. We're kind of good on the MC's
So what's happened to me?
fee. What's happened?
I lost my coin purse with my
Lost
keys
your
in it.
mind?
I did.
Okay, kids.
All right.
Find your
All right,
coin
man.
purse, but it's there
All right.
somewhere.
Good night.
And I gotta get an email out to the
Okay, good. Yes, I found my coin purse, so everything is okay.
Okay, that was a good
That's
night.
disaster. I
I
hope
thought
so,
Keith
yeah.
did great.
I feel,
And
yes.
Andrena's